We have people sitting here on the stairs and we have a question.
Hello? What amazes me about your work is your enormous love of human beings and their flaws, especially their flaws. And I was wondering, after all these years of friction with people, aren't you fed up with men?
No, come on. I would be far from it. There's one moment in Encounters at the End of the World where a Bulgarian caterpillar driver, and this caterpillar driver actually holds a PhD in philosophy and a PhD in comparative literature. And I loved him so much that he's twice in the film, early in the film and at the end in the film. And he says something which hit me like a lightning, and I thought, this is somebody I love. He would be my friend forever. And he says, his grandmother, before he could even read and write, his grandmother read the Iliad and the Odyssey to him and read about the Argonauts. And he was already on voyages out there into the lands of imagination. And he said, this was a moment I fell in love with the world. And I thought, this is a moment, if I die now, it's fine. That's all I need to know, yes. It's because exactly that's my life. I recognize my life in it. And of course I have traveled around. I have made films with all sorts of different people in different countries. But I have fallen in love with the world, including with the human race. Sometimes, however, against my better judgment. But it is as it is, and a man like the Bulgarian caterpillar driver is a quintessential figure that is almost like a self-description. It's all of a sudden you meet somebody who could be your brother, whom you have not met yet, and for those fine moments, everything is worthwhile that I'm doing. Every distance is worthwhile. Every idiot in bureaucracy to fool is worthwhile to go for what I'm doing. So.
And I'm afraid we only have time for one last question. It won't take time for the microphone to travel.
I watched recently the Nosferatu remake you made. I admire both films, the silent original and your remake. And I wanted to ask you, why did you change the ending and turn the Bruno Gard's character into a vampire? Did you want to give it a more pessimistic tone?
Your question is very complex about Nosferatu. In a way, it was an important step for me because I wanted to connect to film culture in Germany, and we had a void of 25 years, almost a quarter of a century, where German culture had mostly sided with the barbarism of the Nazi regime. So we did not have any father figures from whom we could learn. It's much easier for the Greek here because you had a continuity of filmmakers and you can easily learn from your fathers without being embarrassed. So I wanted to connect in a way to the generation of the grandfathers, and the moment I had done this film, I felt like on solid ground. Lotte Eisner, by the way, was also the bridge who got me in contact with the films, the silent films of the 1920s, Murnau, Fritz Lang, Pabst, and others. So at the same time, I did not want to make a one-to-one remake. It would have been silly. You see, it would have been pedantic. And I thought I should somehow change or do a different step in the genre itself. In Murnau's film, the vampire is like an insect. He has no soul. He's completely like an insect. Kinski in Nosferatu is a being full of human suffering, full of solitude, absence of love. All these things are deeply human emotions that he mostly does not have, and the suffering from it. And in a way, the end of my film, Nosferatu, is darker than Murnau's film, because all of a sudden the vampire perpetuates itself and spreads out. I do not remember exactly what brought me to that, but I certainly had the feeling there should be something which would not be completely pedantic. However, sometimes I've heard of a remake that was made in Bollywood of an American film, West Side Story. And they did shot for shot precisely like West Side Story, with Indian dancers and Indian movie stars, and I think this is wonderful. So it must be completely and utterly crazy, and I think it would only work if it's really an absolutely pedantic sort of remake of that film. I still haven't seen it, but I'm in search of it. I heard there was something out like that. So question of remake is of course touching your essential sort of creative authority that you have yourself and your own identity versus the identity of Murnau. And I think it is all right to find some friction with them, not only admiration. I would not go for that. I do believe that Murnau's film still is the greatest of all German films, and it was a visionary film. It was ahead of its time. And a few other films of that time somehow had a presentiment of something very dark coming at Germany. I'm totally convinced of that. And I love the man for his insight and for his presentiment of events that ultimately were catastrophic. The biggest catastrophe in the 20th century, and probably within a millennium at least. So I truly admire Murnau, and in a way I'm at ease with myself because I'm connected. I'm connected to the flow of what Lotte Eisner called legitimate German culture versus the barbarism. So and of course this was an attempt to claim the territory of legitimacy, and without further argument I can say whatever I've made before, whatever I've made afterwards has a certain amount of legitimacy about it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here.
Best of luck to all of you who are going to make their own films. Best of luck.